Okay guys, hello. So a lot of you have been asking me about talents, builds, spec, gear, all that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna just do one single video of everything that pretty much need to know about all those questions for phase 1. This is at level 25 of Season of Discovery. So first things first, what are the stat priorities? So let's talk about Resto Druid. So first thing for Resto Druid is stamina and intellect. Okay, this is specifically for PvP, stamina and intellect, and you want to, as much as you can, have all leather gear. Say you have a really good cloth belt, that's fine, but for the most part I'd stick to leather. There's lots of stuff on the auction house. You don't even really need the higher level stuff. You're only going to lose 1 to 2 stat points if you have something a little lower. So for example, these 3 int, 3 stam bracers have done me just fine, and if I buy, a level 25 version, they might have 4 int and 4 stam, so I'm just barely losing any stats, but price-wise, they're a lot cheaper on the auction house. Next thing to go over with druids for healing in battlegrounds with Resto, you have very little mana to use. You go very fast, so my suggestion would be to run something similar to what I'm doing, where you heal with something like Wild Growth for team fights, but then you're still trying to do damage and support with your pants having Star Surge on them. Star Surge is so strong right now, I highly recommend using that instead of Life Bloom for now, just because of mana issues. The other thing to think about as a Resto Druid in Battlegrounds is you're probably there as kind of a support role, so you need to be using Entangling Roots a lot to try and peel for your priests, who are really going to be pumping out the heals. And then also, if you are running flags, that's kind of why we want to make sure that we have a lot of stamina and a lot of armor from leather gear, instead of just running something with a lot of cloth pieces or a lot of spirit on your gear. Those things are great for PvE, but for PvP, we really want to stay away from those things. The other really important rune, probably the most important rune to have as a druid, is Survival of the Fittest. This is really big. Paired with your helm from Warsong Gulch, this is going to give you 6% less chance to get critically hit, and then you're also going to have 15% damage reduction total while in human form, and then 25% damage reduction when in bear form. So pretty much a massive need for PvP. This is a bit of a grind. This is the one that's tied behind the quest turn-in stuff in Ratchet, sorry, and it is a little bit of a pain, but I highly recommend it. It's going to be a huge thing for you in PvP. I use it almost all the time, no matter what spec I'm playing. The only time I'd use something else pretty much is Wild Strikes if I'm with a pre-made and I'm with a melee group. But beyond that, definitely Survival of the Fittest. Alright, and now, after talking about Resto Druid, we're going to talk about Balanced Druid next. The reason I'm going to Balanced Druid next is because the gearing is pretty much identical. So we're looking for leather pieces, and we're looking for plus stamina and plus intellect. Yes, you can run cloth pieces, you can run pieces that have more spell damage on them. However, you're already doing so much baseline damage that I believe that the survivability is paramount to anything else. For me, I enjoy the survivability more because it allows me to stay alive and stay in fights longer instead of just doing a lot of burst and then dying anyways. So that's why I personally choose that method. If you're in a group a lot of the time, or you have someone who you can reliably count on for heals, then maybe going a little bit more of a glass cannon spec with more cloth pieces or pieces that have a lot more spell damage could be an option for you. However, this is just what I like to do. Now, when it comes to runes, I would be using Star Surge, Sunfire, and yes, I would still be using Survival of the Fittest. You can go ahead and use Fury of the Storm Rage if you really have that much uptime, but for the most part, the fact that Star Surge is on such a short cooldown, when I'm chasing people, I really don't have a chance to stop and cast, and then also in team fights, it's much more beneficial for me to, say, throw out a Hot or throw out a Entangling Roots between my Star Surge being off of its cooldown than really worrying too much about sending out Wraths. So I just personally don't play with Fury of the Storm Mage. If you like it, then by all means, go ahead and play with it. but that's just kind of what I like to prioritize. Alright, this now leads us into Feral. So Feral is one of those specs that's a little bit more nuanced in terms of gearing. So you could play Feral in the gear that I have gone over with Resto and Balance. You just are not going to have as much front load damage, but you can make up for that with being able to stay alive, pop out of form, heal yourself, and shapeshift more often because of your mana pool. However, if you want to, you can go obviously a more PvE-centric build where you're running a lot of just stamina and strength and agility. Obviously, strength and agility are kind of your key stats. For Feral, I would be prioritizing strength at this level. The +2 AP per strength is a little bit nicer than the crit that you get from the agility, in my opinion. Now, this is kind of where things get a little bit more personalized for your class. If you want to do tons of upfront damage and you don't really care about sustain or surviving, then yes, by all means use all your PvE gear. Just go balls to the wall with attack power and strength, okay? Now, what I like to do is I take and pick and choose from some of my best pieces that I have, and I weave in a little bit of intellect gear as well. So for example, Panther armor, which is 2 strength and 9 agility, is what I'd be using in PvE. However, when I do PvP, I will be using Hydra Hide because it has more armor. It has strength on it, doesn't have any agility, but it does have strength on it. But the big thing is it also has 7 intellect and a huge amount of health. So yeah, I would be prioritizing pieces like this. Also something like these wrists, they have a good amount of stamina and strength. These would be something I would prioritize myself. Now, when it goes into other pieces like rings and some of your smaller pieces like your belt and your legs, those are pieces I'd probably throw around with some intellect gear and just kind of find that sweet spot where you feel like you have enough mana to leave form and heal yourself or root a target or peel for someone, but then you also feel like you have enough mana to still also go back into those forms. If you're just using only your Feral DPS gear, a lot of times you just lack that mana pool. So that's just kind of what I would do with Phase 1 at level 25. Now, as we progress throughout the levels, all this stuff is going to change a bit. Those are still kind of all baseline guidances and principles that you can take forward, but in terms of how things will go into the future, I can't really say, especially with all the runes that will be up in the air. And hey, we could get a rune that drastically reduces the cost of shapeshifting, and then having more intellect and more of a mana pool in PvP maybe won't matter as much. So those are things to think about, but in terms of level 25, this is definitely what I would do. And now let's talk about talents. Okay guys, first thing first, this is called Talented. I love it. It's a great add-on. You can have templates, and then you can come in here and quickly customize your templates, and it makes things really simple and easy, especially if you are PvPing a lot or switching out talents. So right now, this is currently what I am using as a balanced druid. You can play this differently. I just really like Nature's Reach because of the range that it gives you. 42-yard range for Star Surge is insane, and everything else here is just kind of standard stuff. Obviously, Improve Moonfire and Improve Wrath are really nice, pretty much necessities in PvE, and in PvP, obviously, I'm saying you're not going to use Wrath as much, but you know, you still do stuff out in the world between battlegrounds, so it's nice to have this Talented. Now, if you're a Night Elf and you don't have War Stomp, I probably would put a point in Nature's Grasp, whether you're doing 4 and 1, or you're losing this point in Vengeance and putting it there. That's probably what I would do. Also, Improved Tangling Roots is really nice to obviously get more roots on targets. I don't take Natural Shapeshifter because I actually try to shapeshift as little as I can when I'm playing Balance, because the mana cost is so great. And the benefits for shapeshifting, besides removing roots, really just isn't there. Obviously, starting out in cat form and dumping some energy, your energy bar into Sunfires can be a nice thing, but this is just kind of what I play as Balance right now. Now, for a all-around build, So there's some of you guys that just want simplicity, right? You don't want to respec all the time. You just want to play one build that you can pretty much do anything in. And my suggestion here would be this. Go into Ferocity. Now, the next part is your choice. This row of talents are all pretty weak. We don't have Pounce, we only have Bash, and it is a smaller stun than it normally is. So putting points into Brutal Impact is kind of pointless in my opinion. You can either put points into Thick Hide, which doesn't really give you that much mitigation, or you can put it into Feral Instinct, which helps you sneak around and more threat in bear form if you are deciding to go that route and tank. Really, these are your choice. Sometimes I'll put them into Thick Hide, sometimes I'll put them into Feral Instinct, so it doesn't really matter. But really what we want to do is get down to Feline Swiftness. So then we can put 2 points into Feline Swiftness. This is basically a necessity for just all sorts of world content and being able to run flags, get to and from locations quickly, and this is just a huge quality of life. The next point I would put in is Nature's Grasp. This is very, very nice as a druid and extremely nice as a night elf because night elves don't have War Stomp, so it can be a little bit tricky to get off a cast right in someone's face. So if you need something that can kind of help you get some distance, Nature's Grasp definitely is that one. Now, at this point, it kind of becomes your playground. So you have 3 more points. What you can do is you could dump all of them into Furor. You could dump them all into Sharpened Claws, which I personally normally do. Or you could do something like picking up Feral Charge and putting a few points into improving Nature's Grasp, putting a few points into Sharpened Claws, or just, if you really want to get crazy, just putting 2 points for that little bit of chance to get Rage and Energy when you shift. For me personally, I don't find myself using Feral Charge that often. It takes a while to generate enough rage to actually use it, and the other thing is so many classes have spell abilities that are just doing spell damage, and so it's actually better for me to just shift into Cat and either get out of range from a melee or just make some distance when it's against a caster. So I personally choose to shift out of Cat form and then back into Cat form instead of really ever going to Bear. So personally, I would put my 3 points into Sharpened Claws. Now, the reason I say this is kind of a spec for every occasion and you could just stay this spec all the time, it's because of Feline Swiftness. Feline Swiftness is almost mandatory at this level for just overall gameplay. If someone wants you to carry the flag in Warsong Gulch, you really need Feline Swiftness. If you want to get to and from locations quickly, you really need Feline Swiftness. It's just going to help out so much that regardless if you're playing PvP, PvE, if you're doing battlegrounds, or if you're out questing, this is just going to be the ticket. This is what you need. Now, when it comes to the other specs, you do get strong pieces from those specs that can correlate to more DPS or can correlate to maybe a little bit better healing output if you maybe went down and got Reflection. However, I just would probably stay away from those things if you're looking for a one-size-fits-all solution. This is what I would go with just for Phase 1. When it comes to looking at Resto talents and you're just PvEing as Resto, then I would go with something similar to this. These are the key talents you need. The rest would be kind of up to you. Probably just putting 3 in here because you don't really have anything else. You could put 1 point in either of these instead of going 3, but the problem is they're just so negligible. The reason I would take Healing Touch is it's a fairly efficient heal mana-wise, and you can downrank it a bit in PvE if you need to, but I personally would rather be playing as a balanced druid and then just heal on the side. But again, guys, the talent trees at this level, they don't offer a whole lot outside of Feline Swiftness, Omen of Clarity, and Natural Weapons. So those are the big ones that you can look at. I would say Reflection also is pretty big, but then that's much more a situation with PvE. So I don't know, guys. End of the day, talent points are really, really subjective, and there's not really like a best tree for just overall gameplay. If you're wanting to talk about specifically best things for PvE, then obviously there's more of specific builds, obviously, for that. But for me, PvE and PvP together, not wanting to respec a lot, just try and pick up Feline Swiftness, okay? I personally have been messing around with these balance talents. I really like them, but man, anytime you don't have the world buff and you don't have that 20% increased movement speed, I really start missing Feline Swiftness. So if you're a person that doesn't want to have to respec a lot, that's what I would do. Anyways, guys, that's more or less all I wanted to talk about. Hopefully this answers all of your questions. I know I get questions about talents and gear a lot. I'm not going to go over every single piece of gear that I have individually just because those pieces are always changing. But again, I will just reiterate, if you're balance or resto, I would go with intellect and stamina with prioritizing leather gear. That's for PvP. Now, with feral druids, it's going to be strength and stamina on leather gear, and then putting in some intellect to find a sweet spot for being able to have somewhat of a decent mana pool. So that's kind of all that I've got for you. Hopefully that helps, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.